If you've been watching this channel or have seen any of my videos, you'll quickly notice that I shoot mostly Sony full-frame cameras. It's the system that I learned on, and over the years I've tested a fair amount of their lenses for both underwater and topside shooting. So let's go through my go-to lenses for Sony full-frame cameras for shooting underwater. So let's start wide with the Sony 12-24 f4G lens. Now you're not going to see much of an optical difference between the f4 and the f2.8 version, since underwater you'll be shooting at higher apertures anyways, so I opted for the less expensive f4 version. Now typically underwater, when we're shooting wide angle, we want to go as wide as possible to get as much of the environment in our frame. However, anywhere from 12 to 14 is what I would consider ultra wide. You're going to get a really distinct look that, in my opinion, should be reserved for specific shots. I'm not reaching for this lens for general wide angle shooting. I found that at 12mm, the corners are a bit too soft for my taste, and it distorts subjects in a weird way when they swim to the frame. However, if I am looking for an ultra wide shot, I will throw this lens on and punch into around 14mm to clean up some of the softness in the corners. So that brings me to my next wide angle lens, which is the Sony 16-35 f4 PZ. Now this is probably the most popular wide angle lens for underwater shooting due to its useful focal range, minimal distortion, and the power zoom function allows for zooming internally using custom buttons on the back of the camera. Its size offers an extremely streamlined setup, and similar to the lens before, you won't see much of an optical difference between the f2.8 and the f4 version. So take it from someone that invested in that 2.8 version and barely touches it underwater, pick up the f4 PZ version and save some money. This lens goes in my bag for every trip and every shoot, and if any of your travel plans involve a plane, again, the size of this lens cannot be overstated. Moving down the focal ranges, my next go-to lens is the Sigma 24-70 f2.8. Topside shooters will recognize this lens as the first recommendation for a great all-around focal range, and underwater it's no different. If I'm on a dive site with a variety of subjects to shoot, I'm taking the 24-70. 24 is wide enough to capture the environment around me, while 70 is tight enough to capture details. It's not quite macro, but it's enough to fill the frame with my subject. I have the older Sigma version, which I found no issues using on newer Sony cameras, but there are now more compact and sharper options available both from Sigma and Sony. Jumping into macro, we have what's been said to be the sharpest lens on the market, which is the Sony 90mm f2.8 macro. It's definitely an older lens, but it'll be hard to find a Sony macro shooter that isn't still shooting with it. I shot a ton of black water with this lens, and I'm happy with the results that I came back with. Recently, Tamron released a 90mm macro, which will have some more updated specs at a bit of a cheaper price, but either way, the 90mm is the go-to macro lens for Sony full-frame cameras. Alright, so there are my go-to lenses for shooting underwater on the Sony full-frame camera. Hopefully in the future we'll have some new lenses come out and I can update this video, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments below or shoot us an email to ikelite@ikelite.com.